One of the hardest parts of being a police officer today is that you can't pass the buck. There's no one else to pass it to. Hi everybody, welcome to today's bonus badge cam lesson here at Active Self-Protection. I'm your host, John Correa, still on isolation for COVID, so my co-host Mike can't make it with us this week. Today's video comes to us from my hometown of Phoenix, Arizona. Today's video brought to you by New Way Ford. New Way helps people all over the country find the right new or used car at the best price with incredible service. We bought Mrs. Asp's 2021 Bronco Sport from New Way, and I'm a satisfied customer. If you see me rolling in my New Way Ford F-150, come say hi and let New Way give you a quote on your next vehicle purchase. If you go watch the release from Phoenix Police Department, this guy has called 911 and told them they needed to get to his house right now and hurled a bunch of curse words at the 911 operator. And then when the operator asked what the problem was, he said, "Officer down," a whole bunch, and hung up. So let's listen in on their first interaction.
It's the Phoenix Police Department. It's the Phoenix Police Department. You want to come to the front doors and talk to you?
Didn't you call us?
No, I did not.
Are you sure?
No, I don't need you. You're an idiot. Get away from my house. I'm leaving you. I'm leaving this place. You.
All right, have a good night, sir.
You pig.
Have a good night.
Pig.
Hey, just that boy. Have a good night. Come on.
A few minutes after they left, he called 911 again and demanded that they come back, so they're back for another try.
Sir, do you need the fire department?
Get away. You get away.
Sir,
There's
you need
blood.
the
Oh,
fire
wait.
department.
No, there's blood. No.
You
No,
don't
you
want
get
the
away.
fire
Get away, you police department. I kill you.
Okay.
You
No,
bitch.
you're the police
You
department.
fucking
Or fire
bitch.
department.
I hate women. Get the off my property. Bitch, I hate women. Go away.
Do you not need medical
Go
attention?
away, witch. No, I don't need anything from you.
Okay, have a
I
good
don't
night.
need you guys either.
Have a good night.
Go away. I'm gonna kill you.
All right.
All of you.
Have a good night.
Idiots.
After the officers left a second time, he called 911 no fewer than 13 times. This group of officers is CIT trained, so they are crisis intervention trained officers who have come to try to see if they can help this guy. But in the 911 calls, he also said that he would kill them, so this is pretty bad.
Stanley, Phoenix PD.
What do you want?
Do you need medical attention? You call the fire department.
I don't know.
Oh, I don't know either.
I got blood over the damn house.
Well, the fire department's here. Can they help you?
No. They're idiots.
Okay, well, why are you calling them then? What?
I'm not calling them.
He's coming over. We're just trying to get you some help, Stanley.
I have a gun.
You have
Put the gun down.
Yes, I have a gun.
Hey, put it down.
Put it down. We're just trying to get you some help, Stanley.
I have a gun.
Put the gun down.
Yes, I have a gun.
Hey, put it down.
Put it down.
Okay, stop. Back off. Back off. Get offline.
We're just trying to get you some help, Stanley.
I have a gun.
Put the gun down.
Yes, I have a gun.
Hey, put it down.
Put it down.
Okay, stop. Back off. Back off. Get offline.
See it from a third angle here. He comes out and you heard him say, "I have a gun" at this point. Shows what certainly looks like a gun at them. You can see all the lights and all that. We'll talk about it. Come to find out that the gun that he had was actually a squirt gun of all things, though obviously impossible to see for that. They gave him as much care as they possibly could, but he succumbed to his injuries, and we get to think about some significant lessons. It's just incredibly difficult stuff. Would you think about joining us for our monthly online seminars? They're free for Gold Patron members and Firearms Legal Protection members. We take deep dives every month on a new topic, so hit the link in the description and see what we're talking about now. So clearly this guy was looking for a fight with these officers, but I think they did a really good job of doing everything they can to de-escalate. They had to respond to the 911 call, especially because, you know, obviously this was one of those calls where they're like, okay, so clearly something's off with this guy. We got to go and help him. So the officers respond, and when you call 911, that's what's going to happen. And clearly this guy at the end of things wanted to have a confrontation with the cops, clearly was emotionally disturbed. But let's think about the first and second interactions here. And I do think these officers did a very good job on the first interaction and the second interaction of trying to de-escalate. Of course, de-escalation is up to the other person. You can't de-escalate anyone. They have to choose to de-escalate. But I think these officers did a pretty good job of trying to establish contact and build rapport. And when he was loud and obnoxious and whatever, they're like, okay, sir, if you don't want us here, we will leave. I think that was absolutely the right choice because he hadn't committed any crimes or anything like that. There was no, like, you know, it didn't matter. He didn't like cops. He didn't want them there. He even said mean, nasty things about I don't like women and I'll tell you why and all that stuff. And I love that the officers didn't take the bait. They stayed cool. They stayed collected. Hey, we're here to help you. We're here for the fire department to see you if they need to. So whatever can we do, sir, to help you? And I think that that was really excellent work from these officers. Now, of course, by the time that the third one shows up here, we've got some pretty significant change. So he's called and harassed 911 a whole bunch. And you might say, well, we're just going to ignore him for the night. But really, can you? I mean, ignoring a 911 call is going to cause huge negative repercussions in the community. So the police clearly can't do that. And they also can't pass the buck to someone else. So I know some people are going to say, well, why didn't a social worker show up? Well, these officers are crisis intervention trained officers. And since this guy has said, I will kill you and those kinds of things, well, the fire department wasn't willing to go. Certainly a social worker or a mental health professional is not going to go without some officers there for their protection. So there's really no other solution here other than to try to intervene on this guy ahead of time. And I don't know his family situation or those things, but the officers were forced to be in this kind of bad situation, and he's the one who escalated it. And I think they did a pretty good job of de-escalating it. Let's talk from a tactical perspective at this point. I do think that there's definitely some things that we can think about. And I want to notice here that he decides to come to the door and he says, I've got a gun. Now, first thing here, this is a handheld light that this officer has. We'll see it in some other frames that she has her handheld light up. And I think that is a great choice. But notice here that in the camera, it gets washed out big time. But from an eyeball perspective, you want to have a light that's bright enough to get some light photons through that white door to your subject and back to you. And that's going to take a pretty good amount. You actually want less spill here rather than more to bounce fewer of the barrier past you. So you got a pretty big barrier here, but lighting up a target so that you can see, because there's, you know, again, darkness right at the doorway and you want to be able to see through that and see what's in his hands, I think is very important. Now, of course, you can see right here he comes through, and that certainly looks to me like a firearm. As we pointed at it there, this guy comes out, says he has a gun, has threatened to kill people, and kill officers in particular, and certainly looks like he has a firearm on him. And so is this an objectively reasonable use of force? Yes, it is a mistake of fact. It is because, again, he's got a water gun in his hand, but given the lighting conditions, given everything else that's going on, given the totality of the circumstances, I think it's very reasonable that the officers would recognize here, okay, this guy wants to have a gunfight with me and he's willing to point a gun at me and use deadly force. Is it a bad outcome? Yeah, it's a terrible outcome, but a terrible outcome brought by the perp, not by the officers. I think the officers acted very reasonably here. Now, as we look at all of the officers in conjunction, we see a very interesting spot here. And one of the things that I want to notice is you notice right here, she's using her handheld, doesn't even have her firearm out yet. This is why, again, private citizens, certainly handheld light important. For officers as well, the brightest handheld light that you can have, because before the gun comes out, you absolutely want to have the ability to light up what's going on, to see. Now, of course, for our officers as well, you notice these officers have pistol-mounted lights, and I think for all law enforcement officers, you should have a high-quality pistol-mounted light on your gun. Now, we're going to notice a couple of problems with the pistol-mounted lights that we see, and in particular, the problem that we saw there is the strobe mode. So strobe modes and momentary modes, I think you should disable on your pistol-mounted lights all day long. And exactly for this reason, you saw the one officer pick up his pistol and start the strobe light, and then it came off and it was giving him a hard time. You gotta train with your pistol-mounted light. You gotta train to use it, and I think that momentary is not very helpful. Strobe is certainly not helpful, so get rid of that if you possibly can. You want good, bright, white light. Now, these guys also are moving. We wanna talk about some of the movement stuff that we saw here, and also the fact that they are in a very difficult spot in terms of their firearm safety. So you gotta be a professional here, because we see our officer as he comes out and shows us the problem that he's facing. Number one, the strobe, you notice that it went off in that moment. And so you see the guy pointing a gun at us here, but that light discipline, I see this pretty often when an officer pulls a light, and that's private citizens too, but we see it on badge cams far more, we almost never see it in surveillance footage, that he turned the light on and then it instantly came off again because he used the momentary. And when you need a light on something with your pistol, you want to make sure that you get that light turned on, and that means you need to train with it. And I know you get very little training in low light environments in terms of practice, but you got to work that on your own to get that light turned on when you need it so that it's there when you need it, unlike what we saw here was the strobing and flashing and those things. Not very helpful. Notice the foreground here that our officer is looking at, and a couple things. You notice that there's an officer in the front, and now as the officers are coming back, watch the partner come right in close. This is why we want to be very cautious with the rules of safe firearms handling. Worked out okay here. But number one, when the guns were drawn, there was an officer downrange. That's gonna happen. You just gotta not point a gun at him. And here we had an officer who is a little ways downrange, who then floated and moved into the line of fire of the officer who has the gun out here. Again, no harm, no foul in this particular case. You just want to be very cautious and recognize that those change in a minute. You've got to be aware of what's going around, because you certainly would not want to put a bullet in one of your partners. This officer didn't. You saw the muzzle move downward, and that's why you don't see what's going on camera anymore. Finally, we see these officers as well. You see the flashing light there, again, not helpful, but also notice that this officer is at an oblique angle. So I think having this officer at an oblique angle was a really good thing. They call that the L-shaped ambush, and I think that can be helpful, but make sure that you are pointing your firearms in a safe direction. These officers were stuck in a very, very bad spot. Of course, they had to respond. I think they responded as best they could, even though it's a negative outcome. I think these officers covered their ass.